probably say that they have reduced the prices of fertilizer. But there are countries, there are parts of this country which don't even need fertilizer. They just simply sometimes rely on farmyard manure because fertilizer will dry their small places. Therefore, what exactly would you recommend? Because Kenyans went to the streets complaining about the high cost of living. Some of them wearing sufurias on their heads. And we are here to try and see whether we can help mitigate the situation. And here, there's political goodwill, I think, from both sides. You say that sometimes there's lack of political goodwill, but the reason we are sitting as NADCO, National Dialogue Committee, illustrates the fact that we, at least the political leadership, is united in trying to come up with a solution. One area is you have not talked about high taxation, for example, but you talk about progressive. I like this, progressive taxation, and not coming up with a straight hammer and say you pay 10% VAT or 18%. Right now the problem is 16% VAT on fuel, which has created a big problem in the country. So in the immediate term, what would you recommend that this committee can consider? Thank you. I've spoken for very long, but I really wanted to appreciate your contribution.
Okay. Yes, Omar? Please, if you can just restrict the first questions just to after, then we'll come to the other people here.
Thank you for your very insightful presentation. SEED has been a very reputable organization for many years that we've had a reference point to. Just one issue that I wanted to get your further thoughts on is the sustainability of subsidies. You talked about some of these intervention measures that are supposed to be austerity or safety net for the most vulnerable in society. So what do you think is the sustainability of subsidies and its economic efficacy in the long term? Number two, you talked quite a bit about external factors. What are these external factors that you are trying to allude to? Thirdly, it might not be directly related to you, but it was mentioned to a certain extent by Masinde, who said that there really might not be a correlation in the hiking of the price of fuel to that of the tax increase or the VAT increase. But one of the things that it is also related to is the volatility of the dollar against the Kenyan currency. Thuge told us that the dollar has been the Kenyan shillings have been overvalued by about 25%. Do you agree with that? And what is causing this volatility of the shilling and other currencies against the dollar? Is it the interest rates having been higher in the US, where I think right now they're almost 5 or 6%. And lastly, the role of agriculture, that has been the emphasis of the Kenya Kwanza government. We are saying that we want to boost production of, in terms of food, because we import about $8 billion worth of food, including cooking oil. So we've invited investors from Indonesia to come and do local manufacturing of edible oils, and we have tried to do this fuel subsidies on agriculture, and God's mercy has sent us rain. But what we wanted to make the frontier in terms of this economic transformation is pegged on agriculture. Do you think it's a right priority, helping the farmers to produce more so that we ease the demand on the dollar, and probably help make sure that we have more economic, the food prices of food are lowered?
Yes, Eugene. Thank you very much. I think first of all to thank Muliro and the other presenters, and to say I think he has really raised what the other presenters had raised, right from Margaret, who started us off, to Kwame, to Masinde, and to himself. And what he talked about was the issue of breaching the social contract, the issue of the tax burden, actually, overburdening the ordinary citizen. I think Margaret said it's only up to a point, then it becomes counterproductive. And that overburdening, I think you put it very eloquently in terms of reaching a level where it actually breaches that social contract. I think from the presentations we've had, I want to thank you very much for joining us and making very specific recommendations. I think Masinde had a very interesting analogy of the mosquito net, where the citizen in a crisis during COVID, there were many safety nets that were put in place to cushion the citizen from the harsh economic adversities that came with COVID-19. Some of the things that we did at the time, because I was in that administration, was the reduction of taxes. You have talked about that tax burden. The other experts have talked about reduction of certain taxes. But at the height of COVID, I think we did reduce certain taxes, including the income tax from 30 to 25%. We had the VAT itself. At the time, I think we were at 16%. We reduced it to 14%. And we had other tax waivers for those low-income earners. And I saw in your presentation, you're saying those at the bottom are the ones bearing the greatest burden when we are overburdening the taxpayer. And we had a cutoff for those who are earning 24,000 monthly salaries and below. We cushioned them against this. I think other COVID interventions that we have put touch on the education sector, and I think you have recommended more investment in education. We have the infrastructure, building classrooms and desks, and many other interventions across different sectors. So what would like you to probably, I don't know if you're following your other presenters in terms of the specific areas of reduction. So the issue is not if, it is how we can reduce this burden that is a real serious challenge to the taxpayer. And we don't reach a situation where we have the situation like arose in the Bible of Balaam and the donkey, where the donkey was overburdened to the point of actually talking to Balaam. I think where we've reached in Kenya today, Kenyans are like that donkey that had to talk, go to the streets and talk and say, this burden is too much. So we are looking at the areas where the burden can be reduced for Kenyans to breathe in terms of short-term and in terms of long-term interventions. So as you conclude, probably we already have what you have presented, but if you have anything more in terms of specific areas of reduction, we'll be very happy to receive your written presentations, in addition to what you have presented, which really agrees with what the others have presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. Catherine?
Thank you, Arthur, for your presentation. You have actually touched on many issues, especially when you look at the cost of living in terms of food and the poverty level, food poverty levels for the ordinary Kenyans. This is indeed something that touches most of the Kenyans. And you've also gone ahead to give us and explored ways in which we can pursue to settle this. One of the ways you talked about is the reduction of budgetary deficits. Specifically, maybe you would have gone ahead and looked at this budgetary in your submissions if you're going to do any other supplementary paper. Which specific budgetary deficits are you pointing at? You have been very specific on the tax, and I think I like the idea that you talked about progressive taxation, which will be encouraged for the low cadre people, earning Kenyans maybe to pay less, and also for the well-earning maybe well-paid Kenyans earning more. Those should actually be taxed more. But as you say this, let us get the specifics on this. I like your idea on the prioritizing of education and also supporting the small entrepreneurs in their daily running of their businesses. That would also cut it down. But most importantly, I think I am on the food poverty levels of Kenyans. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, one question. I just want to plead that you send us the full version of your presentation, because what we have here seems to be an abridged version. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe for me, and I also want to join my colleagues in thanking you for this very insightful presentation. And I'll be very specific. When you talk about progressive taxation, and you say you consider progressive taxation which ensures that those who can't afford to pay more do so, my straight question to that is that would that be in relation to what happened in the Finance Bill of 2023, where those earning above $500,000 shillings were the ones being taxed more in terms of the review of the tax bracket? That, in my view, would fall within that category of a progressive taxation system, where people who are earning, as proposed by Parliament in this year's Finance Bill, people who are earning above $500,000 shillings are now required to pay more tax than others. And that also falls within the other provisions, even what is currently being debated by Kenyans in terms of universal healthcare and NHIF, where those who earn more should pay more. But unfortunately, in our circumstances, I think those who pay more also have the elements of the microphone that I'm using and access to the media, and therefore are more critical of tax policies that are progressive. And therefore, those then at the bottom of the pyramid who have no access to the microphone and cameras that we have access to, then have no voice to speak for them. And we find ourselves in a situation where those of us who are earning more have a louder voice than those who have no voice. And probably those are the people you saw wearing sufurias in the streets, as Kwame said, because they had no voice to speak for them. Two, you have spoken about the paradox of tax, increase the tax dilemma and the paradox of austerity. And I fully agree with you as a student of economics. However, the successful interventions that you quote, Arthur, to me are more of interventions that would work very well in an efficient economy. And I believe Kwame, who is here, who is also a student of economics, would agree with me, just like Arthur, you probably would agree with me, that Kenya is not an efficient economy. And therefore, being an inefficient economy, we may have to borrow from some of the unconventional methods that you have proposed of Ireland. And I want to believe that is what Honorable Hassan Omar was referring to, in relation to the monetary policy that the central bank governor spoke of, I think, only last week, in terms of the interventions that have been there on the Kenya shilling. And now they are saying they have allowed the Kenya shilling to take its equilibrium level without propping it up artificially. Would that also, my question be, warrant or qualify to be such an unconventional method as the case was for Ireland? Two, I agree with you, despite being an inefficient economy, Germany, you told us, South Korea invested increasingly in infrastructure. My direct question, the heavy investment in housing, the heavy investment in infrastructural development in terms of rollout of roads projects across the country, do these qualify again as such increased investment and increased spending in infrastructure that would spur economic activity and help our economy recover? Because I think, as you have said and all other presenters have told us today, we are yet to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic. The heavy investment, I think in your conclusion, you have rightly advised us to deal with issues to do with transparency and accountability in government, and the control of budget had also touched largely on that, and I think even the Institute of Economic Affairs. You've also rightly advised that we heavily invest in education, and I'm not sure I have the figures, but I think education in the last budget that we passed in Parliament, it was actually the highest consumer of our resources at about 27.2%, followed by energy, ICT, and infrastructure at about 20%. Would we then say that heavy investment in education is what you're advising us that we should look into, besides, of course, other social safety nets like the investments that we have proposed under the universal health care in the 4 bills that Parliament passed and was sent to just about 3 weeks ago. Would this, as my question, be also warrant some of those very sustainable measures that will help our economy to recover? Vis-a-vis what you have said would be other interventions, and I rightly agree with Honorable Eugene Wamalwa that indeed there are interventions, and I was the chair of the budget committee in 2019, and we had tax cuts. But remember, these tax cuts were only for a period of about 6 months. How sustainable is it to have tax cuts that are for a short period, vis-a-vis now the probably longer view measures that you propose in terms of heavy investment in infrastructure, heavy investment in education, heavy investment in ICT that this current administration has taken, vis-a-vis those, I'm trying to avoid the term knee-jerk reaction to the COVID pandemic, which was a short-term stopgap measure for tax cuts that were only for a period. We agree, and I think the presenters before you, Arthur, if you are listening, have indicated that some of the, and I think it was the controller of budget or one of the other presenters whose presentation had the shortfalls that come with such tax cuts, and the huge fiscal deficits you are left in, those fiscal deficits leading to heavier borrowing. Where would you advise us to sit in? Would you propose that we go for this short-term knee-jerk tax cuts that will get us into a larger hole that we were in from the presentations by the earlier presenters? Arthur, thank you. Arthur, you can go on. Maybe attempt to answer those.
Well, thank you very much for your questions. Yeah, I think we could spend a lot of time debating this, and I'm not going to pretend that I have, the final answer to all of them. I think these are elements for a broader conversation, which I believe, the other colleagues who have also spoken before me will also be able to contribute to. Just for starters, yes, I think the presentation that I made will be available. I will send the final version to the Secretariat, and then they can distribute it from there. Where should I start? Let us see. Okay, I think a couple of things. I mean, and I think the questions that you all put to me are fairly valid questions, and I think they warrant much deeper engagement and conversation. Just two things to say. I think starting off from the point of view of the tax increases that have been promulgated earlier this year with the finance bill and then subsequently. And you're right in saying that yes, there is a progressive element to that in the way that we are, taxing higher people and delivering. I think where the problem emerges is that people feel, well, they're being taxed more, but they do not necessarily see a commensurate increment in the services that are being delivered. So yes, we are going to pay more for the healthcare system, but a lot of people will tell you that the hospital situation has not necessarily changed. I think very many of us are still also contributing, probably on a daily basis, to help defray hospital expenses for our friends, our relatives. And I think it is this sense of okay, I don't think people have an issue paying more, but they are fine. Let's pay more, but let the service also improve. And I think there is this gap that is not necessarily being seeming too narrow, and that I think is what is creating a sense of some dissonance within the system. There was the element of agriculture and the food system and how we are dealing with it. And I think I was asked a specific question, how can we tackle the high cost of food? Again, I think there are many people who have spoken more eloquently to this. The view that some of us have is that I think, first of all, Kenya is an agricultural, agriculture is the largest employer of Kenyans in one form or another. Secondly, a lot of the food that is produced in our countries is from the small scale producers. Should we not, try and understand how is it that we can improve the quality of production of these small scale farmers? There used to be mechanisms which, for one reason or another, may not be working very well today, such as cooperatives, which I think in the beginning were also not only helping to market, but also helping to improve the quality of output that the people were engaging in. We had, agricultural extension, which I think over time has also declined and is no longer the big thing. But I think fundamentally the conversation has to emerge in terms of, rather than looking into importing food or understanding how we can do these things, to take a step back and say, how can we begin to build on what we are actually producing ourselves and make sure that it gets distributed well within the markets, the national markets. Not more than more than one occasion I think I have been to Trans Nzoia, Western Kenya, and you find that their maize is in the fields, is sort of not being uptaken. People are telling you, well, it's not being bought. But then here on the eastern side, we have dilemmas of how food security and that sort of thing. So I think the whole question of how we market, or how our internal markets work, needs to be addressed. And I think the moment we can find markets for these people, automatically you're putting money in their pockets, which means that they become consumers of goods and services, which means that in one form or another they are contributing to the tax system, because whether they're paying taxes directly or indirectly through VAT and those sorts of things, the exchequer benefits. But if they're not part of the market system, we all lose. So I think this also needs to be looked at, and I think there are also issues there about the extent to which we want to industrialize. Is that even a thing that we ought to be considering? Is something that we need to perhaps have a much more intense conversation about. I think there are many questions about which are the specific areas of intervention that we might want to tackle, and where do we start? Again, I think these are elements. I don't have a crystal ball to say let's go here rather than there, but I think if we admit, and it seems to be the case, that there is an economic crisis of sorts, one has to start by asking, and I think this is where also the role of this committee is critical, in beginning to saying, what do we want to achieve as a result of these economic interventions we have? What are we going to protect? And what do we hope to achieve? And I think this is again part of the social contract negotiation. Because if we are saying that, yes, we are in financial trouble, but we are not going to sell all our family jewelry, so that means of necessity that we will take a different tack in trying to meet the deficits that we have. And this is my own sense, is that I think the extent of negotiation of how the pain is supposed to be shared is what is missing, and this is what has been causing the tension. So there has been a decision to impose a certain amount of austerity on Kenyans. Maybe or not is not for me to say. But I think the response of the Kenyans, which are saying, no, we reject this attempt to put an austerity on us, it is something that then perhaps needs to make us reflect. As I was preparing for my presentation, I came across a very interesting example of how in South Korea, during the crisis in '97, Korean citizens actually came up and they raised close to $27 billion to give to their government. And how did they do that? They went in their banks, they gave, they withdrew money to give to they sold their jewelry, And that was because I think there was also the social contract that existed. And the citizens said, okay, we are in this together. So, the old lady sold her earrings and whatever, and they put that into the game, and the government was able to repay its foreign debt, $27 billion, and also push back on the austerity sort of things. Are those options that are available to us in Kenya? It is a function of also the extent to which I think we've been able to agree that there is a problem, and that this problem involves all of us. So I think in a roundabout way, coming to answer that question, what should be prioritized first, what should be prioritized next or last? I think these are elements of a negotiation that has to happen at another level. But it all begins from the immediate question: what do we want to protect, and then what do we want to achieve? In all of this, and I think one thing we also have to reflect upon is that even if we make an intervention today in some of these things, we're not necessarily going to see the result of it tomorrow morning, because cause and effect, they are not closely related in time and space. And this can be frustrating, I think, also for policymakers, because you want, and also the politicians, because you want to tell people, this is what I've done, and see, it's already working. The problems that we are trying to deal with are not necessarily problems that can be fixed overnight. And I think that is something that we all have to acknowledge. And therefore, when we're also making interventions, we need to have the longer term view in addressing some of these problems, because quick fixes will only lead us back into a deeper hole. So, yes, we might say, let us do tax cuts. But if we do not analyze or have not got a good understanding of the nature of the economy and the nature of the holes we are trying to plug, we might end up, as the controller budget said, end up creating bigger holes, because then the resources we are raising are then being invested in other things that are not necessarily generating new resources. Two more points, and then I'll end here, my rather roundabout way. I think the question also, yes, we're making large investments in education and health. I think that there's a critical question, and when we look at, I think we need to look at these numbers, not just from the point of view of this is the lump sum we are putting into the education budget, but to also explode it and say, of this 100 that is going into education, how much of this is actually going into salaries and emoluments? How much of this is actually going into renewing what you might consider the plant and equipment component of that sector? So sometimes, and I don't have the figures at my fingertips, but if I recall from some work we did a while ago, we are spending large amounts of money in some of these social sectors, but these are really to also cover personnel costs. And that is not necessarily investing in developing those sectors. So I think there also has to be the question of how do we grow them, and how are we investing in them to make them actually more efficient, to be able to deliver the services that are necessary. And I think this also takes us to another area which the controller of budget, I think, touched on in her presentation at the beginning, which was saying we need to explore public-private partnerships. Perhaps this could be an option. I think what we need to have a conversation about is how can we expand service delivery. But even as we do that, I think some of these conversations need to happen within a context of what are the rules and the values that are going to get. What we've been seeing a lot of is that much as we are privatizing, the approach has been to privatize profit, socialize the losses. And I think that is not necessarily where we ought to be going with these PPPs, because then what happens at the end of the day is that people also begin to see, yeah, they've been privatizing this and that, but the benefits are not necessarily accruing, because the whole notion of public goods is missing. And so as we do all of this public good that we're taking forward, how do we build on these, strengthen the public goods? Because austerity has, I think, as an initial step, that of puncturing the public goods, but also the public's trust is damaged. So I think those are some of the things we want to think about. I have not answered, I think, many of the questions directly because, I think it will require much more time, and perhaps that is also something that the other people who are in this panel that are more competent to respond to than myself. But I thank you for your questions, and I'm open to any further follow-ups that may be there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much yet again. And I think we should now go back to our panelists here. And I think there are Kwame, and even Masinde. For example, I think we're in agreement that, and I heard this from Kwame, you mentioned that 15.1 million Kenyans are currently suffering from food poverty. You also described the Kenyan predicament as a mix of bad luck, I think it's COVID-related, from a COVID pandemic, and also bad economic decisions. What, in your view, are the worst three economic decisions that have been made, and perhaps what would you recommend? And secondly, how has the decline in key agricultural prices, such as tea, coffee, macadamia, impacted on poverty and the cost of living? These are important issues, and I'm sure that Arthur is still on the line. I personally prefer, and I like the example of Sweden, how tax cuts were able to turn and transform that country's economic fortunes, unleashing entrepreneurship and innovation in education and research. And does it surprise any of us that this high taxation has a lot to do with, in your presentations, capital flight, and therefore instability, fluctuations, and in the level of the Kenyan shilling? How do we mitigate all these things? And I think that's why we called you, so that we call a spade a spade. We do not necessarily have to take any defensive positions. Other himself agrees 1 in 3 Kenyans is facing food insecurity. The onset of rains notwithstanding, because unless we improve and as he said, push upwards the smallholder farmer, and nothing happens. And one critical thing the Comptroller of Budget raised, and I thank you for it, is integrity. Kenyans have this feeling that you're going to raise all these taxes and they end up being misappropriated in the first place. How are we going to deal with that issue, which only you, Comptroller, raised? Integrity. And therefore the breach in social contract, as Muliro is saying, where taxes are seen to be unfair and an avenue for stealing. Well, what happens? Instead of realizing an upward economic trajectory, what we instead see is confusion in the marketplace everywhere. Kenyans working in Kiamaiko and other places are worried. They could bring in goods from wherever, share a container, right? 3 of them, now they can't because of taxation. Sorry, but these are the issues, and this one is now addressed to all of you. And maybe Kwame and the Comptroller.
Thank you. Can I? Yeah. Okay. I've got just two questions or so. One is to Madam Dr. Margaret Nyakango. You seem to suggest that there are loopholes around Article 223 that the government officers continue to take advantage of, okay? And therefore abuse the whole principle of Article 223. So, and suggest that we need to make some amendments. I need to understand you better. Are these amendments to Article 223 of the Constitution or to the enabling statute, that is the PFM Act? would you be having specific amendments in mind? Two is on the issue of levy. This is to Masinde, my good friend Masinde. You seem to suggest that we need to perhaps tie these levies on basic pay, especially the housing levy, as opposed to the gross pay. Would you have in mind an idea what would be the impact of taking that trajectory? Okay, because it seems to be a very, very popular suggestion in my view, and something that can easily impact very, very heavily and positively on the taxpayers. Finally, Masinde again, which specific expenditures would you want to see government reduce as a way of dealing with the skyrocketing cost of living? And how do you leverage the matters of exports and FDI? Okay? Thank you.
Yes, Council. Control of budget. Again, I'm still on this issue of the dollar. I am reliably informed that there's $8.5 billion in the Kenyan market, so there's no scarcity of dollars. But it's an artificial crisis created in terms of scarcity. That there are individuals holding to the dollar on the basis that the shilling is sliding. And the more the scarcity, because we did the G2G, which particularly has injected another $3 billion to the economy because of the deferred payment. So is there a way we can do those mambo matatu thing and get some Kenyans to put back some of those dollars, because as part of the sabotage appears artificial? And why this volatility, again to you, Martin Masinde, you on the dollar, what is your economic explanation, together with Kwame, of the volatility of the dollar? That and it's not only against the Kenyan shilling; it's against all the other currencies in the region. I don't know how the Uganda shilling is appearing to hold on, but the other currencies are sliding quite almost proportionally. Secondly, this whole idea of the housing levy, control of budget, is supposed to support the government housing plan. And even when we designed the housing program a few years ago, it is the housing levy that faced legal opposition then, and therefore the permanent secretary in his State Department were not able to proceed with that program before the elections. We have been able to at least push this through, and the housing levy is intended to provide an offtake to the people who want to inject capital into building of these houses through the PPP that you spoke about. So it's supposed to be an off-taker to these housing programs for those who are able to buy the houses from the various incomes. So to those who are not able, then that's the off-take. The government will take the market risk for those who are not able to sell off all the units that they so built. In your estimation, the program is supposed to employ all cadres of employment. Housing site is a site where you get a highly skilled architect, engineer, and semi-skilled masons interpreting the same plan. So therefore, we are thinking we will provide employment to the various cadres. Do you think that is still a feasible way of putting money back into the economy to allow some bit of economic activity through labor-intensive investment? The last question I had was to use that where's the Kwame presentation? I had it here. Where you suggested that we reduce prices of some of the commodities. Do you have the specific commodities that we think we need to reduce prices on? And then lastly, Kwame, by the time we took over, let me remind you, some of the big members here are speaking like Kenya Kwanza has been in government for 100 years, like Ganu. We have been in government for 1 year. President RUTO took office in September last year, and you've all addressed the debt question very effectively. That we were faced with a heavy debt burden, and I saw David D's tweet saying that it is a miracle that we have not defaulted. Where does that default take us to? And the president said we will not take domestic borrowing to pay salaries, so that we continue, because the rate lately we are paying 15% plus for domestic borrowing. So where does that debt question fit into this whole economic ecosystem? Because at one point we want to be an aerated country in terms of debt repayment. We are inviting FDIs. If you see the president's blitz across the globe, it's about foreign direct investment from Saudi Arabia, from Indonesia, from the United States, on various sectors of the economy. So if today the country has poor ratings, and therefore, what does that leave us in terms of our debt patterns? Do we just abandon them and say now we reduce taxes, remove the fuel development levy, which was supposed to backstop the SGR, we remove this, we remove that? Simply the kind of what Ishungwa called the knee-jerk reactions to a crisis. So we've bitten the bullet. We don't know whether we've bitten the right bullet.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mine is to the control of budget. As ways of mitigating on the cost of living, you have made a proposal that we should increase allocations to existing programs like cash transfer schemes. Maybe from where you are sitting, I think the current allocation is 2,000, and I agree with you that that's really minimum. Do you have any figure you can throw to us on what increase you are looking at, from 2,000 to what? Related to that is, there are also a number of Kenyans who are on the lower cadre of earning. You had somebody mention that the minimum salary is at 15,000. And maybe Kenyans earning 15,000, 50,000 are the ones who are hardest hit by the rising cost of living. Can you maybe give us a proposal on what should be the ideal minimum wage for Kenyans that can mitigate the current rise in cost of living? Number two, I think you've really been candid. You have opened up on the cash situation for the country, and you have mentioned, and I believe rightly so, that reduction of our deficit financing is a solution to the current, will be a solution to our current debt crisis. And from the figures you have given, it's clear that as a country, we are really facing a cash crunch. So we must tighten our belts. We must put some measures in place, maybe like what Lyndon Johnson did in the US in 1965, where there was direct cuts on particular ministries. I think the hardest hit in the US government then was the defense ministry. Now, what in your view should be our top 3 priorities on government cuts on expenditure in government? From where you're sitting, if you had to propose 3 priorities in cuts on government expenditure. Finally, from your presentation, what I've gotten is that, and I think that's the law, the PFM Act requires that budgets be contained within the expenditure ceilings of the approved mid-term expenditure framework. I think that's the legal position, and I fully agree with you. But it seems the prevailing situation is that the current budgets do not comply. The question I'm asking now, just as a lawyer, are these current budgets then, as passed, illegal? Really going by what you have presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll take one also, and I don't know whether it's to anyone.
Sorry, I forgot what you said,
Yes.
with your permission. Now, you mentioned something on hiring spree by counties, yeah? And you mentioned that some are actually spending 47% of their allocations on P&E, personal emoluments. Now, you have left out the situation from national government. You just gave us a position of what is prevailing in counties, but you have not given us the situation on national government. And these are the spiral effect on counties. The Senate last week, we had a situation where some governors have made a petition that because national government is taking in many advisors, because the national government has made proposals for budgetary allocation for spouses of certain kind of office holders within the government, the governors also want to get the same allocation for their spouses. So there is that, there is that spiral effect downwards, They say they have seen in the budget spouses are being allocated 500 million. They also want to be allocated. So can you also give us a true picture, the situation as it is on the national government in terms of the recruitments, advisors for the big office holders and the likes? Thank you.
Catherine had something.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Margaret, for your presentation. I think it's been an eye-opener. And to this team, I think we have listened to the cream of this country in terms of presentations on the economic status of this country. Dr. You are very clear, and you have progressively told us how the economy has depreciated from year in, year out, progressively. I think from the last 3 years, it's been on a deteriorating level. And you attributed it to poor predictions. That was clearly from you. How, in your own wisdom, is these poor predictions going to be curbed, especially now being the director in the control of budget? You also were very clear about the bonds that are now at 18%, and you said it's very, very, it's actually pathetic. Anything that you can do about that, maybe be able to put it in your paper. And also, Dr. Masinde, thank you. You also mentioned something on the exemption of tax, and I think I heard you very clearly. What about the exemption of tax? Is it that the people who are being exempted from tax don't deserve it, or there's corruption in a manner in which they're sorted out? And interestingly, again, you also talked about overlapping of mandates by ministerial, by different functions from different ministries. So can you be able to point out for us which are these overlapping specific functions that we can address in this? Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Probably I will start off with the control of budget in relation to what Senator Mugeni was asking on 2 issues. You mentioned the prevalence of manual payrolls in counties where staff are being paid manually and in most cases in cash. I would want to know then what is your role as a controller of budget, and how do you help the country to deal with that issue of manual payrolls, and also the question of pending bills. As you rightly say, those pending bills should constitute the first charge to the exchequer. But your office continues to approve payments for current contracts, probably on the basis of kickbacks that governors and their sidekicks in the counties are getting, at the expense of pending bills. And control of budget, you agree with me, even the current lot of governors, very few of them are settling pending bills. Especially those who have joined the first time, they say they are pending bills that were incurred by their predecessors, and therefore they do not settle them. You have all agreed, or rather what came to me, across to me, from all the presentations, is that this country is yet to recover from the COVID pandemic and the effects of that COVID pandemic to our economy. The Institute of Economic Affairs, you have also rightly put it that inflation at the moment is higher than the wage increments as they are. my question to you, Kwame, would be, then is our problem not an income problem per se, other than, because inflation, as you all again rightly said, there is inflation that is informed by certain things that are beyond our control. But isn't our problem an income problem that so many Kenyans, as you all rightly say, the economy is yet to recover from the effects of the COVID pandemic, so many Kenyans are still out of employment and therefore lack an income. And it would be my view then that our problem is more of an income problem than actually the cost of living per se. And with that in mind, we have had suggestions. And I will draw reference to the presentation by our colleague Arthur Muliro on infrastructure investment, what he said and what I was pretending that probably the housing agenda and that heavy investment in housing is part of what will spur economic activity and generate incomes by creating jobs for many Kenyans to help deal with the problem of the cost of living. If we were to do what some of the things that Kwame referred to as unintended consequences of certain measures, would there be unintended consequences if, for instance, we decided to do away with the housing levy and decided to abandon the housing agenda altogether? Would there be even a huge ramification in terms of unintended consequences of that decision? On tax reforms, the control of budget, you spoke about registration of the informal sector and imposing tax on their businesses with a view to broadening the tax base. And I think, again, listening to all of you across, including the presentation by Arthur, who even spoke to the agricultural sector, and I agree with him. For instance, today farmers have harvested, we are told, close to 61 million bags. And they will make a handsome return on it. What's their contribution to tax? We have used government resources or taxpayers' money to subsidize fertilizer for them. The decrease in terms of the amount that they will be able to sell their maize may not be as significant, but what is their contribution in tax? And probably I think that's what you are alluding to. How do we incorporate all the other Kenyans who are not paying tax to become taxpayers? Because again, it is my view, and that is my personal view, that those of us who have access to the microphone are the loudest. But there are also those who are not loud and are quiet, but are also not paying taxes. How would you propose that we incorporate them in the tax-paying bracket, especially what I think the controller of tax, controller of budget, not of tax, also alluded to in terms of those who are in the informal sector, who are also benefiting from the social contract between government and the people, but they are not contributing in terms of their responsibility to pay taxes. I would want to hear measures you would want. Somebody spoke about reducing the railway development levy and the IDF fees. I think it was you, Kwame. I don't know, Masinde, if I remember right, I think there was some reduction in the Finance Act of 2023 on the RDL and IDF. I think IDF from 1.5 to something. You probably would jog our minds in terms of, because those are some of the areas you are proposing that we could touch on, and I thought we did do that in the Finance Bill of 2023. What was the other thing I had? Yes, last week but one, this committee sought to retreat outside town or within town in a venue that we would have a lot of time. We could not find accommodation in Nairobi. We could not find accommodation in Naivasha. We could not find accommodation in Mombasa. We had to retreat to some nice place somewhere else outside of the known destinations. And we got the feeling from procurement people who are trying to procure a place for us that the accommodation sector was now slowly recovering. And I do recall some time back I also had a quick trip to Mombasa. I could not find accommodation. I had to get an Airbnb. The growth of the Airbnb sector in Nairobi and major urban centers also points in a way to a recovery of that accommodation and restaurant business. And therefore probably we're on the right trajectory, and that is to Kwame. I don't know where then that, does that give us hope as a country that at least as much as we have not recovered, we are on the right trajectory in terms of moving towards recovery in view of what we are seeing? Or is it a one-off event? I don't know whether it's a big season of tourism. Lastly, you all spoke at length to social safety nets. A need to deepen and increase our social safety nets. Our again speak to measures taken by this government, including the measures around universal health coverage, increment of the people who are the elderly and vulnerable groups of the cash transfer program. And I agree with Senator Mogeni, the quantum of 2,000 or 2,500 may not be much, but increasing those numbers, increasing the people who will be under universal health coverage, especially the most vulnerable in our society, that have been defined in the Act as the indigents of our society, having to have universal health coverage free of charge catered for by the government, increment in food to school-going children across the country, increasing that, doubling actually that number from 4 million to almost 8 million children under food sustenance in schools. Will those again constitute measures that may not be adequate, but given the circumstances of our economy, do you think these are social security safeguards that will help us sustain ourselves, at least in the medium to long term, as we hope for a full recovery of the economy? Lastly, Kwame, are there quick fixes, or do we have to bear the pain for now to have what will be sustainable economic recovery? Thank you. Maybe, Controller, if you could start, then we move to Kwame and Masinde in that order. Just in relation to that issue of pending bills, the labor market, again, what is the role of your office in ensuring that the county governments especially, the expenditures that they are incurring in terms of their budgets goes towards helping the economy to recover? And I have in mind what I have seen, for instance, in my own county. Instead of investing in what would be sustainable economic programs, governors are very quick to invest in what would be more populist political programs. I have seen in my county, for instance, the governor heavily investing in dishing out chicken chicks, what they call improved kienyeji chicks, 5 of them to households, giving piglets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 youth, at the expense of what would be sustainable economic interventions that will help our economy to recover. What is the role of your office in ensuring that our county governments are investing in sustainable economic engagements that will help not just the people but also the economy to recover? Because it is your office that then approves some of these expenditures. Why would you be approving expenditure for what are constitute political handouts at the expense of investing in infrastructure, at the expense of investing in social safety nets, like hospital provision of drugs and construction of hospitals, provision of water, things that Kwame will tell you are more beneficial to the country in the long term than what are more of political engagements. The same thing with us, Parliament. And I say this as a parliamentarian. You have spoken and given us figures of how much the political class in this country is spending in terms of travel and domestic hospitality. What is the role of your office then in curtailing the appetite of county assemblies, parliament, and the executive in dealing with some of these rather populist things to the political class, but very expensive to the ordinary Kenyan?
Thank you very much once again, co-chairs. It's quite a mouthful, but I'll run through them as fast as I can. And I'm going to start with how the high taxation has contributed to capital flight. This was raised by one of the chairs. And indeed, we have seen high taxation leading to high prices, and therefore leading to inflation. So sometimes we do not link the high taxation to the high prices and therefore to the capital flight. And I want to give just one example which will show us the direction in which we are moving. Park fees. This morning, in one of the groups that I am in, I saw the ladies saying, why would I pay $200 to enter the park when I can see the same animals from the Tanzanian side by paying very little? So this is just an example. But some of those things we are doing have a ripple effect. So they affect us in more than one way, and I know my colleagues here will be weighing in on that. Now, in terms of integrity, how can we raise integrity? We must do a root cause analysis. We must say, where did it start raining on us? But let me again just give two examples that are making us move into those areas of loss of integrity. One is insecurity. What do I mean by insecurity? If employees, for instance, are not sure whether they'll be employed tomorrow, what do? They, of course, try to gather as much as possible so that they can run away. Two, if employees are insecure in terms of, again, like how long they'll be doing what they're doing, these issues will create uncertainty, and that uncertainty creates loss of integrity. The fear and uncertainty is one of those areas. The other area is borrowing without a plan. This one, I'm using it in a very colloquial sense, in the sense that I have been approving payments of public debt, and I've looked at what we are paying for. Many of those things cannot be identified. You just find a name of why we borrowed. You cannot trace it to anything. You cannot tell what the money was spent for, and therefore there was no economic gain from that borrowing. It is just like taking Fuliza and then you go to the bar and drink it all. You go back home, you'll find your family hungry, and you'll find all those other things. So I don't really need to gainsay this. That is what we have been doing for a long time. I have discussed with the Auditor General, and we have said, can we track these loans and see what we did with them? Yes, I think it will help us going forward. But just so you know, honorable members, I did a report to the Committee on Public Debt, and they told me, please check on the loans which we have taken recently in 2022. Tell us if we can link them with a project. They were shocked. We could not. we found some ambiguous definitions of the loans, and the Treasury could not tell us what really we were going to do with those loans. So unless we wake up and link our borrowing to actual economic activity, will not come out of this hole. That I can say without fear of contradiction. Now, Honorable Opio Wandai asked about Article 223 and what kind of amendments we are looking at. And what I can say here is that Article 223 has no problem on its own. In fact, the way it's crafted is very okay, and it can serve this country just the way it is. But here we are talking of abuse. We are talking of preparing budgets which are approved on 30th June, and on 5th of July, I find applications for Article 223. That clearly is an abuse of the system, because we are saying that every once in a while, we will find this item which is not budgeted for, or for which the budget is insufficient, and then we'll need to fall back on Article 223. But you will find people are making applications to employ, people are making applications to repair vehicles, to refurbish buildings. Really, those are some of the items that should not belong to Article 223.
Maybe you would tell us, since you are the controller of budget.
Yes.
And I hear you and I can relate to what you are saying, having been a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. What then would you recommend to this committee, whether it's legislative intervention or constitutional safeguards, that one would protect the country from that abuse of Article 223? And I say this with all due respect to yourself. I remember earlier this year or late last year, when you had to share with the country the kind of intimidation that you had to go through under the last regime to approve payments that were illegal and were basically constituted an abuse of that Article 223. And it's the same thing you're speaking to, Controller, when you speak about loans that cannot be tied to anything. And this always happens in the run-up to an election. And 2022 was no exception. What specific measures then would you ask this committee to help your office and help the country with, in terms of probably a constitutional safeguard to your office, so that you never have to go, not yourself, no other officer serving in your office will ever have to go through what you went through, and we completely stall abuse of that Article 223. Because as you rightly say, and I agree with you, Article 223 is in its rightful place in the Constitution. It is its abuse.
Thank you very much once again, Chair. And
I'm sure you can tolerate that interruption very much.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem. So, I don't think I can give a blanket recommendation. What I've been doing, actually, and I do that all the time, is to go on a case-by-case basis. But we must have the political will to say, let us budget in an authentic manner and follow those budgets. Because by the time we are falling back on Article 223, we must be sure that this is something that could not be done within the budgeting framework. So, I am seeking that Parliament, when they are interrogating the budgets, to ensure that those accounting officers are disclosing everything that they need to do. Now, this one does not need any addition to the law. It is what I could say, it's an issue of integrity. So, what I'm doing right now with the National Treasury, who are the generators of this, is to, I respectively tell them that this cannot go through under Article 223. And what we have been doing is, if this is a legitimate request, then it goes through the normal supplementary. So we are doing it on a case-by-case basis. If we went blanket, it is very possible that something will come up that requires to be done under Article 223, and then we would not address it appropriately.
Maybe, and you forgive me,
yes.
Because I am very keen on this. I say that informed by where I have come from. You also took us through a presentation, if members will remember, that was showing the variances between the BPS estimates, the estimates are tabled by the National Treasury and maybe that's why it begins to beat us as a country.
Yes. Yes.
Because if you ask me, and Kwame will bear me witness, and Masinde, we're in the month of October, November now. The budget policy statement and budget making process has already begun. But
For next year.
For the next financial year. But what we do is a copy and paste budgeting process. So by the time people come to actual budget making now in April to June, that's when they realize there's something we never budgeted for. I'll give you a case example this financial year. We put in a lot of money to subsidize farmers in fertilizer inputs and other inputs. We had blessings of the rains, and Honorable Eugene Omalo will bear me witness that farmers in Trans Nzoia and the North and South Rift have done very well in terms of producing maize. But the Ministry of Agriculture never planned for maize dryers. Until when the Met Department announces there's going to be El Nino, and we are caught flat-footed, and we start running around helter-skelter now looking for maize dryers. You buy those maize dryers at a more probably pricier price since it's a last-minute procurement. So what is it, maybe Margaret and His Excellency, you have to bear with me on this one. What is it that we can do to make that process more efficient? And maybe you don't have to answer now, maybe think through it together with Kwame and the others, because we are looking at things that will be sustainable, things that will help us in the country, so that we don't end up with huge fiscal deficits, huge borrowing, huge debt financing, and end up spending all our money paying debt that we should have avoided. Maybe it may not be a question you could answer now, but you can think through it, send us your thoughts probably together with the others. How can we make the budget making process for our country more efficient and more effective?
Co-Chair, I just wanted to propose that perhaps we allow them to answer, then we do another round,
okay.
So that we don't disrupt their...
Well guided. Forgive me, I just happen to be too passionate about these budget issues.
Thank you, thank you. I would then like, in that case, and I agree with the chair that it is something we can look at actually in another forum, so that we address these issues effectively. Let me move to the dollar issue raised by Honorable Omar, in which he has said that there are actually a lot of dollars which are being hidden away in the economy, because then our currency is depreciating all the time. Now, I'm just wondering, a lot of these dollars that we get come from the diaspora. Now, I'm effectively informed, and I think rightly so, that right now there are a lot of panya routes through which dollars come in. I mean that panya routes in the sense that people have devised methods where dollars can be repatriated, say, to South Africa, and then the money finds its way to Kenya in some way, so that it evades the banking system. So if it doesn't go through the banking system, then you may not catch up with it. So there are a lot of dollars coming in through the black markets, and because of the way the currency is depreciating, nobody wants to bring them to the open market because they want the rates to go up. Let me make a suggestion of what I think we can do. I think there should be some form of amnesty, just the same way we have done with the income tax. Can we have some amnesty for people to bring in dollars so that they can be received without any penalties? That is one thing I hope the committee can look at. Now, then there was a question on housing levy in terms of the housing plans and how this was initially stopped and what was intended for offtake then never took off. Allow me to speak like an ordinary citizen in this one. The citizens have lost trust. Now, what happens if every time you speak to someone, they do not keep their word? I think you will not be in a position to trust them the next time they speak. Why I'm saying this is that I keep my ears open a lot of times when people are arguing, my friends on the golf course and all that, and I hear them say, who tells you we'll get these houses? So that lack of trust is making people not to trust the process. It is a very noble idea, and it is supposed to help the citizens. It is supposed to create jobs. It is even supposed to create, all those nice things. But how can we work on improving the trust of the citizens? This is a bit abstract. I don't know how we can even measure the trust, but I'm talking from personal experience because I've been hearing what people are saying on the WhatsApps, on Facebook. Just listen to what the people are saying. They are either completely lost trust or they are losing trust. So that is something we need to look at. Now, which items would we be looking at reducing? Commodities. Supposing we were given by the magic wand and told, pick 3 items that you would like reduced. Here, I will be looking at the food basket of those who are in say the bottom of the pyramid. What are the things that they use? Something to cook with. So that is one area we'll be looking at. I've been looking at the prices of kerosene, the price of makaa, the price of cooking fuel generally is a really sore area because no one can do without it. Then we are looking at sending money. You all know that the cost of sending M-Pesa right now has really gone up. Most of the people who have come to the urban areas who are working in lowly jobs, probably they are security guards, they are maids, call it. They have to send some money home to their parents, to their children, because they can't live with them. Now imagine when we impose and increase excise taxes on sending money, then we are squarely hurting these people. The third thing I would be looking at is VAT on food. And I've looked at all sorts of taxes here. VAT on food. Now, when we introduce VAT on unga, a staple food, then you know the very lowly are going to suffer. So if I had 3 things to choose, those are the things I would choose. Let me move to Senator Umugeni. I'm sure there will be round 2 like we were told. So here we are looking at proposals on allocations to cash transfers. This is pleased to increase the amount. And these people are not many. I think when the last time was over 70s were counted, they were not very many. And they are they have less time with us, isn't it? So even if we double this amount to 4,000, I think would really help them, because they are also subject to inflation and they can only buy so little sugar, you know, so little salt. The 2,000 cannot buy anything. And then it is delayed for many, many months. So if there is anything we would do, it is to increase that amount and give it in a more timely manner. There are these low cadre employees earning the 15,000 who are really hardly hit. And the senator asked if there is an ideal wage that I would suggest. I think I would rather give this to the economists. I don't think this will be good for an accountant. As an accountant, I look at reducing costs. But the economists, I think, will chip in on the ideal minimum wage. Reduction of deficit financing, indeed, we know that we are in a cash crunch. But this cash crunch ni ile ya kujitakia, because like I told you before, we have been borrowing and partying with borrowed money. That is why we are where we are. So we must look very carefully at our spending and reduce this spending. Some of the areas that could be in for budget cuts, and I think the government is already taking measures, thanks to my reports. I think in part I've been reporting where we are spending most. Travel both domestic and international. Then secondly, refurbishments. Yeah, there are many times people are throwing away curtains and bringing in new ones, and a lot of issues like that are very wasteful. Then thirdly, I would be looking at something like the fuel. And here fuel, I'm looking at the kind of vehicles that we buy vis-a-vis the kind of journeys that we make. So look at it in terms of why go to Mombasa if you can go to Naivasha. And I think a concerted effort across the economy can bring a lot of savings in that. Under the PFM expenditure ceilings, we were looking at the current budgets that do not comply with the PFM ceilings. Are they then illegal? Now, I would like to disqualify myself from the illegality in this particular instance, because when we look at national government, we have the sectors, and sectors have leaders, and these things go through public participation. All I can ask is, can these sector leaders do their job? Because if they did their job properly, then we wouldn't be discussing here about illegalities. And circulars are there. I think if they are followed, we should be having the kind of budgets that we expect. Hiring sprees in the counties, which are up to 47. How about the national government in terms of employment? Yes, I've been doing both national and county reports on personnel emolument. So far, the income ratio to the employment has been okay in national government. But watch this space. I'll be reporting on the first quarter. If I find that it has exceeded, you will see it in my reports. Now, going to the counties, let's all appreciate that the counties have a lower income base. So the denominator that they are using to calculate the ratio is much lower. So what are we saying here? The implication is that if the monies to the counties were higher, then probably we would be talking of a lower percentage. If the on-source revenue raised at the counties was higher, it means that the denominator will be higher, and therefore the percentage will be lower. So the message I've been giving to the counties is please try to increase your inflows, because if you increase your inflows, then it means you can accommodate more employment. So that same level of employment would be a much lower percentage if the revenues were higher. So that's what I can say. Now, from Madam Catherine, thank you for the compliment. We have suffered a long time from poor forecasting, and this is an area, please, I would ask the committee to talk to the National Treasury on a very serious note. The exaggerations are in the National Treasury, and let me just give one example. When I was doing the budget for Consolidated Fund Services, this is where my salary is paid from. I found out that my salary was budgeted at 3 times what I'm paid. Wow. I am the only state officer in my institution. So there's nothing like confusion there. I'm all alone. So I asked them, why is the budget showing 3 times what my annual salary is? And it was like that for all the state officers.
What was the answer, madam?
Chairman, I have not received the answer to date.
Integrity. Integrity. They have not answered me why they budgeted 3 times what I'm supposed to be earning. So, now, if that is only my salary, what I'm saying, we don't know what else is dodgy in there. And then when it comes to the supplementary, these amounts are then reallocated to other areas. So, honorable members, I'm asking you to talk to the Treasury in a very matter-of-fact manner to look at the way they are handling the budgeting. I think the problem is there. There is a big problem. Yes. Then let me move to the manual payrolls and what is the role of the COB in terms of manual payrolls. Now, my role, as per the mandate given by the Constitution, I think I don't have to repeat it. My role is advisory as far as this is concerned. So because I look after budget implementation and because I report on a regular basis, I am in contact with this information. So first of all is that when the counties prepare their budgets, they bring the drafts to my office. We analyze and we advise them. Every so often they will tell us we have had and we have made the adjustments. Now, when it comes to implementation, there is a lot of mischief. They'll always go and do other things. And then they'll always prepare a supplementary budget to try and sanitize what has been done. So my office has insisted on always trying to bring them to the straight and narrow in spite of this. But you can imagine that because we have so many counties to begin with, and all of them are doing something, my office is extremely busy trying to check these things and ensuring that they are not going beyond the ceilings. Now we have a system now of registering all workers at the county. The UHR, there is a United HR system which is taking over from the IPPD and which has more features to capture employees and to avoid ghost workers, so to say. So this system is in progress and within which they have complied with this system. This system is being run by the State Department of Public Service. So they keep complaining that that State Department takes very long to implement their requests. But so what we do is that we are consistently and continuously ensuring that they are putting more and more staff onto that system, of course with
a deadline of this year. They are supposed to have complied fully by the end of this financial year. On pending bills, honorable members, like I told you, the pending bills are very high and the causes are many. Now, yet the COB pays current bills instead of the old bills. I would like to respond to this, that I don't pay. Instead, what I do, I approve withdrawals for the payment of pending bills. Now, there is a hidden gem there, in that if I approve the withdrawal, I have no control on who is paid. The money will go to the county, and then the accounting officer will pick different payees and pay them. If you remember, sometime last financial year, I had requested the central bank to give me access to the bank statements of the counties so that I would be tracking these payments. That became a cropper because the Council of Governors threatened to go to court. They could not allow any such thing because there's a lot happening in those statements that apparently I'm not supposed to see. So the long and short of it, Honorable, I have ensured that the counties bring me a list of approved, eligible, we call them eligible pending bills. Along with that, they give me a payment plan and they tell me this is what we think we can accommodate within our cash flows. Now, what I do from my office is to implement that payment plan. When they are bringing the requisitions, I make sure that whatever they say they'll be paying per month is included in their requisitions. Or else, I hold their requisitions until they comply. So I make it a kind of policing affair, which shouldn't be the case, but because they are very difficult in complying, then those problems are there. Now, the other problem that I must mention at this point is the counties are always saying that they don't receive their money in good time. So even when they give a payment plan, if they do not receive their monies at the expected time, then they fail to service those pending bills. So that is still another small elephant in the room. Then there is a third elephant, and this third elephant is called ineligible pending bills. These are people who have worked and they are owed money, but for one reason or another, their documentation is incomplete. Either they did not get a proper LPO, or they worked based on good faith. Now they cannot be paid. These are the people you have had who are in real distress, others are dying, and you know, a lot has happened. You are never going to get paid. At the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council, we have agreed in the last meeting that there should be an intergovernmental committee which will be looking at ineligible pending bills to see which ones can be, you know, ratified through some legal process so that they can be paid, and which ones should be thrown out completely. So that is an ongoing process. Let me move to tax reforms and what we are going to get in form of taxes, saying when we assist the farmers, and this came from the co-chair there. I think this is more of a self-examination where we are saying what services can we provide to the farmers to ensure that they actually sell their produce and get the returns that they expected. I'm sure even if they don't pay directly, these people are going to turn around the economy by spending and therefore paying VAT. So if you have, that is what I would say. You don't have to tax them directly.
Without interrupting, I thought Kimani wanted them taxed. It's okay.
I I think that's what he was saying, Chair, but I'm opposing that and saying, let's improve the economy and let's improve the spending power. These farmers will spend all that money in the shops and in the bars. They buy beer.
In actual fact, control of budget,
yes,
it is a contribution that they make to the economy. I wanted you to allude to, or I was hoping you'd allude to.
Okay.
Because we are talking about inflation that is largely being driven by food prices. So if the farmers make their contribution in terms of being able to provide us with cheaper food, then they have made their contribution in the social contract that Arthur was talking about.
Okay.
I think you've answered it. So there is that contribution, and then there is the purchasing power that will be in their hands. I think the questions have run out now. I need to give...
You've done very well. You don't have to answer everything. Some of them were just general comments, like I'll make one at the tail end.
Yes, there is just one Chair, which on sustainability of economic engagements, and I think there was this question that about the counties, that in terms of what they are doing, is there sustainable development, and what is the role of my office? And I thought I should just contribute to this by saying that the counties have an elaborate planning framework. They start with the County Integrated Development Plan, from which the annual development plans are derived. So if they get it right and ensure there is proper public participation, AP as we call it, then the annual development plans will be derived from that. Then additionally, my office is ensuring now, and this we have made our duty, to ensure that the program-based budgeting, where we link the spending to particular outcomes, is done properly. Then I think we'll be home and dry.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Comment?
Yes, I'm conscious about the shortage of time and the pressure of time, so I'll answer only 4 questions, and I won't take more than 10 minutes. So I think Honorable Kimani Chuma asked me a very direct question, which is basically about widening the tax base. I think we need to make a conscious choice, which is that if you've decided that we can subsidize farmers as taxpayers, and then they have a bumper harvest, and decide for whatever reason politically that they should not pay tax, then you know what you've done is you've shrunk the tax base in terms of the number of people who are then eligible to pay income tax. So you then decide that you should be conscious that the decision you're making is that you're going to pay that money back to consumption prices, and that's fine. But at least what you then know is that this is what we've traded off. Subsidized farmers, especially large farmers, because large farmers are the ones who actually have surpluses to sell, and then government gives them a guaranteed return. So you subsidize them, you're giving them a guaranteed return. It means you're redistributing income from lower people to people, large farmers in Kenya. If that is the decision you're making, then it's fine. But you be conscious that you're redistributing income from smaller people to large industrial farmers. If that's the choice, that's okay. But let's be, admit it upfront. The second question that you asked me was about the housing development levy. The economics of housing is this. Modern houses are actually capital intensive. They're not labor intensive. What you're asking me is this. At the Institute of Economic Affairs, analysis of the memorandum that was issued together with this and some of the information that has been issued, that is not the best way to spend public money. So I'll give you an alternative. The alternative that we've done some very hard thinking about it at the Institute of Economic Affairs is, if you scrap the levy fund, well, you get to keep more money perhaps, but if you scrap the housing levy fund, this is what you could do for the same amount of money. Kenya has 40,000 schools. The number of children in schools in the next 11 years is going to double. Today, 15 million children wake up and go to public school. What that means is that there's a serious shortage in school infrastructure in Kenya, which the government of Kenya does well. Whatever we might talk about the quality of education, the government of Kenya historically has done a pretty decent job educating children, creating quite something. So already the Ministry of Education is struggling to actually keep school infrastructure to match the number of children going to schools. So if Parliament chooses to have a school infrastructure development plan and then fund it every year with this amount of money, you actually cover a greater part of the Republic. And you actually do much, much more for the Republic than housing plan, which is 250,000 people. We have 14 million houses. Those houses will definitely go because they are very heavily subsidized, but you're actually again redistributing income from low-income people to people who can own condominiums and studios. I don't think that is equitable distribution of cash. So maybe that's an idea you can consider. I'll come to the third question.
On the assumption that the housing fund is what is being used to build the houses, because what you're proposing then is use the fund to now expend it on public school infrastructure.
Yes,
which is actually not the case. Maybe probably, if you don't know, the housing fund levy is not being used to construct houses.
No, but the rationale then that means that actually the housing fund is being sold to Kenyans with some misconception, because the idea is if it's the offtake.
We've heard that from the golf courses as a control sake. People have all kinds of perceptions and misconceptions.
Yeah. Yes, but if you speak about it as a housing levy and the way we sell it to our colleagues at the Institute of Economic Affairs is this is your contribution, there's a possibility that you might find the fund. Yeah. I mean, you might find a house. That's the claim that people have. But anyway, regardless of it, if you place personal houses on one side and public schooling on the other, every day public schooling provides greater public value. It's even good for social cohesion, and the cost effectiveness is superior to what you would get from constructing 250,000 houses per year. But let's leave that. Let me go to the third question, coming from Hassan. He asked about where does a default take us to. He's not here, but look, we are Kenyans and we are taxpayers. A default would probably be extremely damaging to everybody. Nobody benefits from a default. No, I don't think anybody benefits from a default at all. So obviously it's a tough thing. But what we suggest for the government of Kenya to say, let Kenyans actually understand the risks. I think the way it's been sold to Kenyans about the payment of the public debt is as if we should be made to be scared. That, look, if you're not too careful and you continue to ask us questions, there'll be a default and you lose your pensions and all this and all that stuff. I think to ensure that because there's going to be pain regardless, an adult conversation about what the options the government is choosing is the superior alternative. We hope it doesn't come, because we know that even after next year's big ticket payments of the Eurobond, subsequent years will have very significant payments still required. So we think that this burden is one thing. Part of sharing the burden is to treat people with respect, right? Citizens, let's have a conversation around this question in that way. So there are no shortcuts, we agree, but perhaps the tone of the conversation could actually be more conversational as opposed to lecturing people. Then, Honorable Kalonzo,
do you think the Kenyan side, sorry to interrupt, would borrow from the Korean example, what you heard from other, where ordinary Koreans were able to say, okay, we're going to pay a public debt, and they contributed over 27 billion. Do you see that happening in this country? Further taxation.
I think that's a good example, but the truth is, Kenyans are even struggling to buy food. Yes. So asking them to contribute to a government public sector kitty to pay for that, and they're paying through taxes. So I think the respect is you pay through taxes. These are difficult times. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, by the way, whether it's the administration, the incumbents, or their predecessors. The point is, we're all here together as Kenyans. We cannot eject from citizenship. Let's all try and hold this thing together. I think that's the point. What could be done at this moment is this. There are 14 million households in Kenya. As we demonstrated, for the lowest 20% of households, their income over the last 1 year has shrunk by 30% relative to the prices of food. Those people need help. So if government wanted to extend help to them by expanding the food subsidy, and it can be distributed very easily through mobile money transfers, this was done. And this is a temporary measure. It is not a permanent one. So your concern about its sustainability is valid. But we could do this for 1 year until we see what happens. It is cheap, 8 billion shillings a month. That is 1 day's collection of revenues based on today's estimates. So that's one thing to consider. It's immediate, it will be extremely helpful, and it will even calm people quite a bit, showing government is here working together with us. Now, the 3 mistakes that you mentioned, Honorable, yes. These are the ones that we at the IE have tracked. There is no doubt anymore that the SGR and the cost at which it was executed was a monumental mistake. I'll give you an example. The entire revenue that has been generated from the SGR for 6 years is 72 billion. That is not even enough to pay the principal payments that were required. So obviously that's a sinking fund. I think it would have to be treated very, very differently. So that's one. More recently, you see, the food problem in Kenya, I think, is improperly analyzed. The problem with food's availability and food security and cost of living is not that there's no supply, sometimes supply is short, but that households at a certain income level, even if the food was available in the market, their income is, so it's an income problem. The conversation we've gone with so far is to subsidize farmers, and it tends to be farmers who are the ones who got the fertilizer and got the seed, and so they have big stores. But if somebody in a certain market say, if this was a Bomas village and their income has not grown for 5 years, that supply does not help. That was another mistake. Then government starts to trade cooking oil. All that money, and we are not questioning the intent, we are questioning the design of these policies. It was improperly designed. The way to do that is actually to support households to be able to consume during a shock such as the one that we saw. But most of the support that government has given are to traders, but more specific to the supply side. So we might have food stores with 67 million bags of grain, right? But we might not have enough. People might still suffer because they do not have enough money to buy the several kilograms that they need per month. That conversation needs to be reframed. It is a demand side problem, not necessarily a supply side problem anymore. So that was a mistake. The final one is basically the debts. And I think the control of budget has mentioned this, the Office of the Control of Budget has. Look, you cannot run a deficit of 6 to 7% per year, regardless of where you were, for 10 consecutive years as we did in the last administration, not expect to have a problem. It was a matter of when, not if. So I think the Parliament needs to be a little bit more conscious about Treasury selling to you that infrastructure solves all problems. It doesn't. As we can tell, we built a lot of infrastructure, stadiums and all those other things. It's not paying for the debt now. They're still going back to the citizens and getting that money to pay for them. Parliament needs a serious conversation with itself about whether you performed your oversight functions well. And my judgment, with the due respect, gentlemen and ladies, is you did extremely poorly.
Thank you.
You must own this problem as well.
Thank you. You hear that, Kimani?
Your Excellency, I hear that, but Kwame will agree with me that within those 10 years we are dealing with a very tyrannical regime, and the control of budgets will bear me witness. You know what you have to go through.
On a lighter note, I know, just a minute, Eugene.
Yes.
Just as Kimani likes to stretch us backwards, I can tell you for a fact, part of the reason we are sitting here today is because of the integrity issues that the control of the budget spoke about. Even as presently constituted, Kimani's parliament and Wandai's parliament is under capture, state capture. So you shouldn't expect much from them. This is why we have to really go deep into these things. Even as we are sitting here, I said this is not even for you. My good friend, Speaker Wetangula, goes out there to dismantle Azimio coalition, where speakers ruling integrity issues, because he wants to use the 21 members of Jubilee, all right, to be able to carry on to make sure that Kimani's taxes are sustained. Sorry, Kimani.
Your Excellency, you definitely know I take great exception to discussing the Speaker of the National Assembly in this forum, and especially on a matter completely unrelated to the economic issues that we are dealing with. Matters that of grave concern to the people of Kenya.
And with all due respect to myself and Honorable Pio and I who sit here, we must give credit to at least the 13th Assembly that we have been bold enough to deal with some of these issues touching on the economy. And I believe history will judge the 13th Assembly different from other assemblies, but also to say, without giving excuse to Parliament, I think is more of a leadership issue than the institution of Parliament. It is about leaders who appreciate the role of institutions, that the controller of budgets is an institution, not the person of Mary Nyakango. That Parliament is an institution, not the persons who sit in Parliament, and respect those institutions, that they have a role to play in budget making, in helping the government and the executive to deal with matters to do with the economy. Therefore, when the controller of budget tells you that paying Telcom, looting 6 billion shillings 2 days to a general election is not right, don't put a gun over her head. Respect that office of the controller of budget. When Parliament, Your Excellency, because I have sat as a chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee, I can tell you things that some of us had to go through because we put our foot down. Masinda is here, he will tell you.
To continue putting your foot down.
And I will assure you, Your Excellency, Parliament as a leader of majority, I will make sure even this government under William Ruto will have to abide by the Constitution and respect institutions. Therefore, let us not have a blanket condemnation of Parliament. I know we have had this debate for the last 7 years with Kwame on the role of Parliament.
Can I finish in a minute?
Co-chairs.
I think I took the floor from you.
No, co-chairs, I was just proposing we go by only proposal. They finish, then we do a second round, because we have a second round.
Okay. And so the final point, which is basically what you asked for. Honorable Wandai asked, you did not ask me this, but please allow me to just answer. Which specific expenditures do you want to see GOK reduce? Yes. So we will tell you. In the year 2019, the Institute of Economic Affairs was concerned about how much fuel government was buying. So we went through all the parliamentary estimates and went line by line through every purchase of fuel by the public sector, keeping aside the military and the police. And the figure that we found suggested to us that the government of Kenya was buying 150,000 liters of diesel per day from the numbers that Parliament approved for expenditure. That cannot be right. Where are all these vehicles going to? Either that, or government vehicles are pumped with fuel and they just ride around. It was an enormous number. And then we also checked telecommunications. So we checked what telecommunications are, and we find out that certain departments in the public sector have a telecommunications bill of 20,000 shillings per person per month. 20,000 shillings per person per month. Per person. So it's not basically for a whole office of 30 people. That's a lot of money. So what I'm trying to suggest here is, if Parliament took its work diligently and went line by line through items, asking, why are we buying this quantity of things, which is what you're expected by the Constitution to do, you would find a lot of space for savings without having to have an abrupt cut in any budgets, because you'll save a lot of money which could be could be directed to the more important things that we spoke about. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now,
We can now hear the person who guides Parliament in making those decisions.
Thank you, Chair. I want to comment on 223. My view is that we have a different opinion, members, that Article 223 is not foolproof because it requires parliamentary approval. And my English reading of approval is something very different. That Parliament must be satisfied that that approval is within the law. So we have some proposals in terms of perhaps tightening the PFM law to give specific conditions under which Article 223 is applied. And that's the way it is. Parliament must approve. So the disconnect is that Treasury cannot go ahead and actually spend that money knowing that Parliament, what if Parliament refuses to approve? The leader of majority is way where Baraka was actually, Parliament refused to approve Baraka payment under 223. So I think it's high time we try and look at the PFM. We have some proposals, yes, that can sort of try and tighten the condition under which Article 223 is applied in the PFM.
And everybody knows what happened to me after I refused to approve that payment.
You are suggesting PFM Act, not...
Yes, PFM Act. Yeah. We have some proposals. Okay. I don't know, the lawyers can guide, but we have some proposals.
We need them. That's important. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second issue is the basic pay. What I said, members, is that if you are earning $1 million shillings, right, and you make it, just go up, you make it, you make the levy tax deductible, right? It's deducting and minus deducting. The net amount is that for in a month, you will actually, save 25,000 shillings per month. If you make it, sorry, I mean you lose from the baseline where there was no housing levy to the housing levy, making it tax deductible, you lose 25,000 shillings per month. If you make it not deductible, you lose 30,000 shillings per month. So it was we just thought perhaps for clarity purpose, just to have some, extra income for disposable for spending. Perhaps we need to look at that. Around the administration of this housing levy in terms of taxation, to see whether there is any ambiguity in that. Even I think that a recent AG's direction that I think other directors were not subject to the housing levy. So I think some legal gaps that require to be addressed. I leave the question for dollars to the expert here to help me out. Tax exemptions. What we are saying is that within the East African Community Customs Union, there are some specific loopholes, Honorable Omar, in the sense that sometimes the minister just through the governing, the minister's council in Arusha, they just grant 2 or 3 entities, and I have a gazette notice here actually, which I don't want to read, just 2 or 3 or 4 entities to exempt them from import duty, because import duty is an ECMA, a customs union issue. You realize, 2 or 3 entities have been given that rebate of not paying import duty. On the basis of that, we're not very sure. So we thought perhaps it is high time we look at this and try and tighten that. Number 2 is that other than perhaps health, agriculture, some of these things don't make sense. Right? Per year. Right? Per year. And development is 30 million. 30 million. 30 million. So essentially, it's as good as perhaps trying to rethink and just closing down that particular entity and trying to mark them. That's the kind of MDS saving we're talking about. That within national government, we've done so well, and perhaps members I'm confused, but I think let me say this, that the cutting for foreign travel, domestic travel within national government itself, either those transfers that we need to look, into the A&A collection. How can we allow some of these people just let them collect A&A and just, why are they relying on exchequer? What they will do, and I think members of the National Assembly know, at the initial stage of the year, in the estimates, they'll understand A&A completely. Towards supplementary, the last parliament to approve a higher collection of A&A. So these are the things we need to perhaps go into the books and see how to deal with those ones.
Now, just a clarification. Please allow me not to disturb you beyond that. Assume you're 60, you retired 60, right? Alright. There are people who are about to retire and who are already having to pay the housing levy. Right? Do they have any hope whatsoever of getting any house? Why don't you then think in terms of the willing? That's what we talk about, progressive something, rather than having a blanket application. And these are some of the things that get discussed on golf courses. All right? Because you see, and then the trust element. Can we really trust these people? Well, are they not collecting this money to do other things and just get lost? So, since you advise Parliament, have you thought of this? I don't look at Kimani because I don't see it. Just look at this trade.
He's probably looking at me, Your Excellency, because you probably may not understand the nature of the housing levy we are dealing with. It's now a tax.
Yeah,
it's an outright tax.
Yeah.
and to ask whether someone who is about to retire, whether they should pay tax, is akin to asking you if you are above 60 and you are retired, do you pay for tax that provides health care to other people who are fall sick and you are not sick yourself? And it happens. Or the estate of dead people, they pay taxes to provide services.
Yeah.
And that's why I think if we listen to Arthur Muliro,
Arthur was very
and
clear
the social
on
contract,
fairness.
the social contract,
Yes.
I think is what should guide us on matters tax, other than our political inclinations. And I would really beg we
No. I think this has nothing to do with political inclination, Kimani. Arthur was very categorical that the tax regime should be fair, should be seen to be fair. And surely, if you're calling housing levy, people are likely then to get a house. This is a common understanding, the street talk. And they will ask you, surely you're paying tax and you're about to retire? What hope in the world, unless it's your grandchildren, who benefit from this kind of thing? So we need to debunk these things without looking at the political.
Excellency, I will invite you because we have the housing department coming tomorrow.
Yes.
I would plead that we leave that matter to them. They will be able to explain to us that the housing tax is not for me to pay a tax to get that house. Actually, it is a tax. When it was a levy before, at 3% is when that argument then would have held. Now that argument cannot hold because of the bashing that the levy had, and then it was changed into a tax. And I'm sure Nyaga, who is seated there, who is more on the taxation matters, will be able to explain that better than even Masinde.
Yeah. And then there is a typology of these houses that are restricted to various incomes. And the selling price to the market is restricted also to about, is it 55,000 per square meter? And the government then gives the offtake through that housing fund for those by taking the market risk, because it is done through a PPP program. So you get the land, you structure your financing, you come and build, then there are various incomes in terms of the typology, 20 square meters, 40 square meters, and 60 square meters.
Hassan is very conversant with this. When is the first thing?
That's what I was proposing.
First, we are going to break ground in Mombasa very soon.
Mombasa, you are not actually.
And if you pass the integrity test,
Pakistan is complete. I think we leave the matter.
Why don't we co-chair and deal with it tomorrow?
Yeah, I agree with Eugene. Let's deal the housing matter. We have the whole morning tomorrow morning to deal with housing, and I'm sure all of us will have questions to answer.
And we can have Kwame and the rest of the experts.
Yes, you are invited to, since it is an open forum.
We want you to help.
Come and help us.
So the other chair was actually, our thought was, I agree with you, the lead of majority, actually the RDL was adjusted from 2% to 1.5% in the Finance Act, as well as IDF going down from 3.5%.
RDL, His Excellency is asking, is the Railway Development Levy.
Yeah, this acronym.
Yes, it was adjusted.
So just use the RDL, say what it is, because it was your proposal that it be reduced.
Yeah, so he said that the Railway Development Levy was adjusted in the Finance Act from 2% to 1.5%. Downwards. While the import declaration fee was adjusted from 3.5% to 2.5%. But remember, as we are, and our team behind me, as
and also, if I remind you, the RDL and IDF for LPG gas was completely removed.
Yes.
And I thought my memory was having me right. I had to Google and check.
Yeah. So now our imagination was, when you look at August, the landing cost of oil was 108. I think this should be per liter, right? 108 shillings. In September it went to 115.9. We try to debunk and see what is causing the change, right? Prices, international prices, contribute 46.82% of that cost, right? Now, because the way the Railway Development Levy is applied, so the only change, the extra change, was the Railway Development Levy, which grew by 7.69%, and the import declaration levy, which went up by 7.66%. I'm doing VAT because VAT itself has huge significant contribution to revenues. So I'm not discussing that one. So our proposal, if we looked at some of these small things in a way, because it seems as if the import declaration levy is levied on the CIA, cost, insurance, and flights. So as the price of international prices go up, similarly, this also goes up. So just thinking perhaps if we made it in a way that it no longer perhaps goes in line with the international price and find another way of measuring it, then perhaps it will lessen the burden a bit in terms of the total impact every month going forward.
Yeah, think about that, Masinde, a little harder.
Just a thought against revenue collection that is from those particular heads. Yeah. So allow me, Chair, if you don't mind, to my dollar expert.
Yes, Nyaga.
Thank you so much. I'm Robert Snaga from PBO. Thank you, co-chairs, for this opportunity. On the exchange rate, my initial comment is that we need to address the issue about our exchange rate. It's a risk, and it can become systemic going forward. So I think the question was, what are the main causes? The main primary cause is too much imports relative to our exports. The difference between the two, I got some numbers here, is 5.8 billion US dollars, which is about 900 billion, which you have to finance. You have to find new dollars to pay for your imports. And therefore, when you look at the flows of remittances, the flows of other incomes, and exports, the second issue is the US Federal Reserve intervention in the market, basically to address inflation, which was caused by COVID. The inflation in the US was caused by them giving too much money to the public to consume. And therefore, they needed to remove that money from the market.
In subsidies?
Yes, in subsidy. So I think also subsidies have a risk if you overdo them. So when they started removing them by increasing interest rates, then what you are seeing is an outflow of capital. This includes money in the stock market or Nairobi Stock Exchange, and also portfolio investments, whereby people are buying bonds and treasury bills, going back to those countries to buy better instruments anyway. For example, if you are an investor and you are in US, what would you prefer to invest in? A US bond or a Kenyan bond? Yes. When the rates are high. So I think that's the issue. So the capital flow, and it's still going on, and that's why I'm saying we need to address this matter. It's still going on in the stock market. The Safaricom today is trading at 12 shillings 50 cents, down from about 40, I think 2 years ago. Number 3, we have a more developed Nairobi Stock Exchange and a financial market. Our banks are more connected internationally. We actually have Kenya Commercial Bank, Equity, we find them in DRC, in Uganda. We also have a lot of MNCs, multinational corporations here, Coca-Cola, and many others. So when there's a problem in our economy related to fluctuations of our economy or even the dollar, they're more likely to move their money from our economy. So a developed financial market is actually can tend to bring that problem. And you're going to see this, which is similar to South Africa and Egypt. But to less connected economies like Uganda and Tanzania, we don't see such a big effect. And therefore, I'm able then to answer the earlier question, which is why is Kenya relative to Tanzania and Uganda, why is our shilling being worse off? So that is actually the main answer. And the other answer is FDI. FDI flows. The other issue is about speculation.
What about FDI flows?
The FDI flows to Kenya have been lower compared to Tanzania.
Yeah. Well, it is clear, isn't it? You'd agree that we have lost our competitive edge to Tanzania. We heard that from the panelists.
Yeah, yes.
Tanzania is more attractive investment destination than Kenya. We should be asking our questions why. Don't justify.
The primary reason is gas, Yeah, at this point in time, they're doing gas plants. Secondly, they're doing a big railway development. At this time, we did our SGR in 2013-15. But then they're doing it now.
2013 to 2016,
yes,
and ended up
yes,
taking it to the bush.
So now, right now what we are seeing is they're doing much better in FDI than Kenya at the moment. I could also explain in terms of food. We import more food than them. We import more food than them. Uganda, Tanzania. Let me give another explanation for that. Debt repayments and expectations around debt repayments, particularly the next year's Eurobond, which we took in 2014. Therefore, the markets, I mean, you and me, if you're in the market, you'll be worried about whether the country will be able to repay that that Eurobond, which is dollar-based, and therefore some people may be accumulating some dollars at home or in whichever way, or speculating on them, hoping. And I think this discussion is there. If you're in social media, people expecting the rates to continue worsening. And that's why in my proposal, we have to address the matter of the exchange rate. And finally, let me give the solution, because I just did need to just mention the problems that are providing other issues. One, remittances. Remittances is a quick win if we were to do it. And I think the current government is doing enough in terms of trying to airlift more Kenyans to Saudi Arabia and other countries. I think that's a good positive thing, which can help those flows to compensate for our imports. Secondly, address exports. Thirdly, macroeconomic interventions. One, inflation. When you're fighting inflation, you tend to raise interest rates. I would expect that to be helping us, but it seems it's not responding as much. The other issue is growth. If you improve your growth rate, obviously things are going to look better. But finally, Chair, is regulation. We have an opportunity to address the whole aspect about regulation. In 2011-12, I was involved in the committee which was addressing the sudden fall of the Kenya shilling that time. So this problem we had it in 2011-12. Again, Parliament formed an ad hoc committee, a select committee to address this particular matter. So I think this still need to have some discussion going forward on how you can address this matter. Exchange rate is one of the most risky prices if you don't get a hold on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One additional information, Chair, is that I think from the supply side, we need to be a bit careful to address the supply side for cereals. Total imports, and cereals constitute 14% of total imports for 2022 and 2023 to date. 14% of total imports
from maize to rice.
Maize to rice and everything. So this import require dollars. So from the supply side, we also need to address some of these bottlenecks of cereals being gotten from our
Couldn't agree more, Masinde, and I think it's the same point that Arthur was making in terms of enhanced investment in the agricultural sector to make sure that we reduce on agricultural produce. I'd ask a specific question to Kwame, but maybe any one of you could answer. Are there, or is there an opportunity for us in this committee to recommend a quick fix solution to the problems that bedevil our country today in terms of the state of the economy and the cost of living? Or do we just maintain sustainable medium to longer term solutions that will give us a more sustainable way of managing our economy? Because I think, and it's out there in the public domain, people expecting that there can be a quick fix solution at the snap of a finger. Is there such a solution? Because as a student of economics, I do not know of any. Maybe from where you sit,
I'll help you might find one.
Your Excellency, I'm talking about quick fix economic solutions, not political ones.
I thought we heard of one, by the way, from the Controller Budget, and I think when it comes to doubling the 2,000 to 4,000, because we're talking about having people have food on the table, basically. Perhaps, in fact, the most vulnerable, the elderly citizens think. So that's one thing. So let's not be pessimistic, Kimani. While Kwame tries to answer your question, he didn't answer mine. He didn't answer mine. Why is it the prices of macadamia and coffee and things are, I put it to him that time. Thank you.
You did. Thank you, Coach. I just wanted to add before Kwame responds. I think part of the reason why we're here is because we have a crisis in our country, and we call you as experts to look at possible solutions, short term, medium, and long term. So we would, even as you guide us, would like to look at what can be done immediately to give Kenyans some relief. And we did it. I mean, when we were in the middle of the COVID crisis, it wasn't just a health crisis, it was a financial crisis. So the taxes that we were able to review at the time, I've referred to them. But also there were things that we did, and some of them Kwame has referred to, particularly in terms of what can be done in the education sector. What we did, we had about 10 billion that went to, kazi mitani, the youth. We also were able to allocate, I think it was about 6.5 billion that also went to the education sector. Construction of classrooms, desks, putting money in the pockets of young people across the country. And I think that pushed a lot of people. So we are not just looking at the long term. The short term we're talking about, maybe our colleagues in Kenya Kwanza are very passionate about the affordable housing. We were equally passionate actually in the last administration because Uhuru Kenyatta's Big Four agenda, housing was a key pillar, and everybody was very passionate. But the reality of the circumstances was that we're in a crisis. That can be postponed, it can be done later. And we were able to do that. So the issue of this housing levy being turned into a tax, I think is the most oppressive task. Most Kenyans are saying we already have mortgages, we can hardly take home a third of our salaries. Imposing this tax on us, and you are forced to pay, it's very oppressive. If there are other ways, my late brother Mike used to say, a good idea can give way to a better idea. If Kome, and this is very refreshing, the brainstorming we're having, to have new ideas, that we don't have to be fixated on this housing thing, because the main agenda for Kenya Kwanza was really, they were saying it's not about housing, it's about creating jobs. I think that this has been the argument. There can be another way of creating jobs. And these are some of the suggestions you are giving us. And I think they're going to benefit our analysis in terms of the way forward. I would also just ask the budget team from Parliament. We heard from the control of budget the issue of the inflated salaries. Is this what we've been hearing about, budgeted corruption, where the inflations? We heard from Kwame talking about, the fuel, more than can be consumed. The budgeting people, I mean, you can guide us. This is what we are hearing about budgeted corruption, and what can be done to make a saving from this so that we are able to push on Kenyans. Lastly, the issue of FDI is very worrying that we are lagging behind our sister countries like Tanzania and others. We know that our Kenya Kwanza colleagues have said the blitz, the global trips, and I'm told it's a record. In 1 year, 38 trips. I think back in 10 years did 32 trips. Can you probably in the last 1 year give us maybe an indication in terms of contribution to the FDI, foreign direct investment, improvement in this period of this administration? Are you in a position to give us that figure. And lastly, in terms of the global examples we were given by Muliro, which one would you recommend for Kenya? Because we are looking at we are in a crisis. We need to see how to get out. Thank you.
Okay, Omar, second round. Maybe Omar, before you go, Eugene, you may benefit from the knowledge that His Excellency at one point was Minister for Foreign Affairs and President Kibaki, I think.
Yeah. If you need my expert opinion on that, I will.
I was just saying that because you were comparing Kibaki's trips and we also know the conditions.
But also, if you look at the onset years of Uhuru Kenyatta, he did 35 trips in 1 year. Because, in fact, even the Economist wrote an article, Kenyans mocking their visiting president because he was never in the country. I think people try to build relations and see whether they can have a significant inflow. I can tell you some of the bilaterals that have been signed and other countries already on the ground, like Malaysia, to invest in the special economic zone. They're already on the ground to invest in CPO. Kenya probably will be the biggest distributor of CPO in the next couple of years because they're doing the tankage and they've done the feasibility. They think we have the leverage of the East African community, 300 million population, and by definition, African free trade. Anyway, these are things that are real. But I wanted to go back to this issue because I can you talked about some bad decisions, SGR and the like. Maybe this is the time when I wanted to also ask the control of budget to say there are severe gaps. When we as Kenya Kwanza were campaigning, we had promised a state capture commission. One, to recover lost wealth and to interrogate some of those state capture issues, including the SGR, the expressway, the telecom. I think it's maybe, is it high time we moved in that direction? Because I think Eugene has been making a lot of reference to his past government. And I think it's important to have a national audit of this past government in the last 10 years to see what are some of these interventions we've had here, including from you, control of budget, are outright criminal. So is there a possibility now to trace those funds so that they can probably help us in this cost of living agenda, which Kwame just told us it's only 8 billion a year, and I know herman, which part was looted, what was looted probably is more than that. It could actually do that 1 year program in terms of subsidy. So is there still window for us to recover this wealth, to bring perpetrators to book, and in addition to that, to look at the deliberate, the negligence of some of these deliberate decisions of the SGR, which Kimani says heads or leads to the bush. The second question, which is my final, but I think no, it has been answered. So I was just referring to my notes. So I think I wanted to get your take on the State Capture Commission and us bringing true accountability to the perpetrators of these economic crimes in the past 10 years.
Mine will go to Nyaga on the second round on the FDIs, the foreign direct investments. And as you've rightly put it, there are some of our peers in the region who in the last year or so, or last 2 years, have attracted more foreign direct investments than we have in Kenya. And as you gave the case of our sister country, one of our neighbors, that are doing their railway now, would you draw a similar parallel with us at the time we were doing our SGR? And what was the level of our foreign direct investments at the time we were doing our SGRs? Because economic sentiments play a big role in attraction of foreign direct investments. And therefore, when the world is optimistic that your economy is on the right trajectory, people tend to invest in your country. Therefore, I would want to hear a parallel between when we were doing our SGR and where we are, the termination of our SGR and that of the sister country or a neighboring country, in terms of where did we terminate our SGR? Are we deriving value out of that SGR when it ended up, those in the media have called it the railway to nowhere? That of the sister country, where is it terminating? Are they deriving more value out of it? 2, is our behavior, especially those of us in the political class. The country you referred to, and I'm avoiding to mention countries because we have members of the press here, they get into elections, they go through elections and life continues. Is there a bearing as to the way we behave in this country where in the run-up, a year to the elections, a year after elections, we are not at ease with ourselves? Does that culture of political violence, and that is precisely why we set up this national dialogue, to make sure that we also end the culture of political violence, does it in any way discourage foreign direct investments from coming into the country?
Well done, Kimani. I think that, so we do not overburden these experts. We could, for example, ask that you update your presentations and be able to recommend to us, because we're on a serious mission and we don't want to fish through you. We're not on a fishing expedition, but we want to be able to know. Kenyans, I started by saying, when I made my earlier remarks, that they are hurting. They demonstrated because of the cost of living. And that's why we felt we didn't want to deal with these other issues and then fail to deal with this all-important matter, according to some of us. Okay? So you could recommend, this is without necessarily borrowing Kimani's quick fix, because there can't be any quick fixes. Is there something we can do with regard to the taxation regime? Because it's always very good when you tax people who are willing or who are able to feel they are part of what you're trying to do to improve their lot. And what can we do in the midterm? And of course, budget, in terms of budgetary procedures, you talk of midterm arrangements, some of which are programs under the Bretton Woods institutions. In fact, we had hoped that representatives of Bretton Woods would also come and share with us. I'm not sure whether they're still coming, but I just wanted to make your task more focused so that you don't deal with some of the long-range issues we may raise from this end. Actually, the thing about national dialogue in this committee is a part of national healing. So you hear some of us having those exchanges, okay? Because like Kimani wants to heal, he wants this thing about SGR seems to be worrying him a lot, and others maybe have. Some of us have deeper issues to worry about, but I think we spare you for now, and please give us, because one thing the control of the budget did was she saw a relationship between the high cost of living and capital flight. That's an issue. I don't know whether our friends was in Njoroge from budget, Nyaga from the budget, parliamentary budget committee, so that we see these things and be able to pronounce ourselves on the way forward as a committee, so that we can help ourselves, help our people. The lower, one thing has also come out clear, Kimani, if you narrow, you kind of enhance the tax base, it becomes a bit more attractive, all right? So that people can pay taxes on a more voluntary basis. I just wanted to ask that you give us some precise presentation out of what you've been saying.
In short, Your Excellency, what you are advising them is that it's not everything that you may be able to answer in this forum. If there is what you can enrich with a more detailed presentation, please feel free, because as His Excellency says, what we want to do is to benefit from what Eugene said. A good idea could bring forth an even better idea. So if you have better ideas that you can help us with, we really want to benefit from those. But maybe you can take one minute or 2 minutes each to sum up some of those issues that we had raised.
Yes, and just to appreciate what the Controller of Budget did, she was very specific. When you're talking about lowering cost of living, you know what the mwananchi is feeling there. You know, basic things, sugar, they can't have the, cooking oil. Come in your response, a little bit a bit specific also. Say, like on our side, we are proposing the issue of, the doubling of the VAT from 8 to 16. We would like it to come back to 8. This housing thing, if there are alternatives, would like that dropped. So we would like some, and you don't have to answer everything now. Yeah. You can give the details in terms of proposals in your further written submissions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just to sum up again, we are here because of the picketing that was done. What have you to say about those who got, the ones who actually, what the losses they suffered during the picketing? Is that also not affecting us?
I think it's related to what I was asking Nyaga, whether the culture of political violence in a way causes the capital flight that we see and discourages foreign direct investments.
Chair, just as my closing remark, in fact, President Samia Suluhu actually said it by herself, that the violence in Kenya has gotten investors to invest in Tanzania. She said it, it's on record.
Don't put words in her mouth. She said, nchi jirani. It's only that that nchi jirani, of course, that is always avoiding mentioning countries.
You must ask the question, why the violence?
Yeah.
You must always go to the root cause of these things. Unless you kind of...
Your Excellency, we can never justify violence.
No.
There can only be reason as to why
we buried Kenyans,
but we should not be seen to justify
we buried
violence.
Kenyans simply because they wanted food on the table. That's very important.
Okay, 2 minutes each, please. Margaret. Sorry, I keep confusing her name, Mary and Margaret.
I think it's Margaret.
Margaret Nyakanga.
It's Margaret, and you forgot salt. Do you know the price of salt has gone up or sure? I was in a village called Isongo in Kakamega, and the ladies told me, salt, at Omena, everything has gone up.
Omena that you just get from the lake. That tells you that the global recession is real, because if even the cost of omena or even salt that is mined from the water, but you of course know getting salt from water is a manufacturing process. When the cost of electricity goes up, the cost of labor goes up, everything is bound to go up, and that's why we really endeavor to deal with this issue in a very rational and objective way, so that we get your expert opinions.
Imani, on a lighter note, not everything has gone up. Some of our values are important. If you want to marry a Kamba girl, you just bring nine cattle. 9 heads. So we may have to revert to 26 goats. Don't worry.
I wish I was not married. I wish I was not married, Your Excellency.
Chair, we don't think very well on time.
Okay, Margaret.
Chairs, the area I want to talk about just a little in the 2 minutes, are we able to establish like how much foreign direct investment has been raised in the last 1 year? This is not possible. Why? Because you cannot do marketing and already get the sales. This is not, the cost and effect is not direct. But having said that, the marketing must be matched by, or rather with the back office services. So what do I mean? If we go out there looking for foreign direct investments, but the investors come and find that our environment is hostile, then we will not have matched the cost that we spend to market with the investments that we can get. So we need to pull up our socks somewhere in the back office. Then there is the issue of state capture in terms of some of the projects. And I just wanted to say that the Auditor General is already on the issue of the SGR. Now, I may not know the extent to which the report has been prepared and what it will bring out, but we all know our systems and they are quite lengthy. So I guess what I wish the Auditor General was here themselves. They would have told us how far they have gone. I think from where I sit, and given that we have been given more time to go and look at these issues and beef up the presentations, I would like to just be very grateful for this opportunity that the committee gave us to give our contributions.
Thank you, Margaret. I hope you do not suffer the same fate under this regime as you did under the last regime.
I have you there.
Yes, you can count on us.
You should not suffer.
You can count on us. Kwame?
Okay. First, I think the major driver for cost of the distress that houses feel about cost of living is the price of living. It's also clear that the income support that government gives through cash transfers is insufficient, both in terms of the number of people covered and the amount. So even without necessarily changing the amount, basically expanding that to say 1-2 million other households is all affordable. 8 billion shillings for the top, the bottom 25%, that's doable. It's not too much money. It would have substantial effects, basically even cohesion. So that's one. We emphasize that. We still think that the housing levy is a bad idea. A superior idea would be actually to use the same resources that have been generated to expand schools throughout the country. Why? Because the demand for schools is just going to grow up, but also schools construction create local jobs. As opposed to constructing condominiums in Nairobi. There'll be fancy apartments, certainly, wherever they would be, but that doesn't create, most of it tends to be capital intensive. I think the third question is, nobody mentions it, the word privatization is considered a bad word. The government of Kenya has substantial assets of very high value. And when you have a problem with making payments, if you can't pay pensioners and you can't feed kids, when you can't construct schools, you let go of assets. And some of those assets could be in a transparent way, governed by a law that Parliament will pass, and it would actually provide some substantial relief. It's not necessarily a solution, but it could provide substantial relief in the short, in the short run. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kome, and PBO.
These are your guys.
I just give them, they are due 2 minutes, but maybe Kome also to inform you that the housing programs are coming also with an element, and maybe just to agree with His Excellency, there's a lot of talk on the housing that information and maybe the ministry should do more to inform Kenyans. Because, for instance, many of the housing projects are coming as mixed-use units with hospitals incorporated with them, and including schools. And therefore, it may cater for some of the things you're talking about. Nyaga?
Thank you so much, Chair.
You don't build a settlement, for instance, replace the entire of Kibra, for instance, where you're housing, say, 1 million people. Do multi-dwelling units that you accommodate 4 or 5 million people, and you don't provide social amenities like schools, hospitals, common user facilities like playgrounds for them, and all those are there. Nyaga?
Thanks so much, Chair. FDI is affected by the climate of doing business in the country. And some of the issues that drive the climate of doing business include 1, political stability, 2, education, infrastructure, good infrastructure, regulations, taxation, including property rights. So you can look at it in a wider format. Number 2.
What was the Foreign Protection? Remember Foreign Investment Protection Act?
Yeah. On the other issue, Chair, you raised the issue about the big ticket investments like SGR. I would imagine if we design them well, you can get the dollars in here, so that those investments are not done here, but the money is transacted outside. So I think that could be a good idea. You can extend the SGR or do other things, including climate financing projects, which is actually a new opportunity for FBI.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Nyaga, Masinde, Komewino, and the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Control of Budget. We, again, in conclusion, just have to say, should there be anything of value that you would find of value to this committee and to the country, please feel free to share with us, either in writing. Also feel free to join us tomorrow as we engage, especially on the housing issue. I would really want to get an engagement between Kwame Owino and the Institute of Economic Affairs and the Ministry of Housing on particular proposals on housing and what they have, and probably could also benefit from also getting information and Kenyans getting more information on the housing agenda as envisioned by them tomorrow. We thank you for your time, and sorry we kept you quite for almost the whole day. It's now 4:45 p.m. but you will also bear with us, because this is one amongst the issues, as His Excellency said, that are very key to this committee and indeed to the country, because the cost of living and the global recession are indeed matters of concern, not just to Kenyans, but to many people around the world. And homemade solutions we can come up with your help would be of great benefit, not just to this committee, but to Kenyans at large. Thank you. God bless you. So, yeah, members, tomorrow, 10 a.m. And Senate is sitting. 9:30.
By 1. Let's make it 9.
Then we will also have to sit on Monday. Because the National Treasury and the So, Secretariat, we have agreed we meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the Housing Department, and then Monday morning with the National Treasury and the Ministry of Energy. Then maybe on Monday we can agree on which other day to meet in the course of that week to look at the instruments as we had agreed, and now view the issues that we will have.
Mtu kama mimi kuongoza maneno yakiwa magumu vile ilivyo. Kama tungekuwa na wengine, Kenya ingekuwa imezama.
What challenges you're witnessing in the country, and are you confident about the solutions being explored and being implemented?
Just like millions of other Kenyans, we're in a state where we are extremely disillusioned with a government that has been in office for the last 1 year and has wasted no opportunity to blame the market. Look at the price of petroleum that drives the cost of everything. Look at the chaos in our universities, occasioned by certain reforms that the president heralded as the solution to the hustlers. You have a situation where in the past, where students were funded, the Higher Education Loans Board would advance loans to students before they report to university. It is about 1 month and a half since first years went to universities and they've not been funded. And you saw yesterday at the Technical University of Kenya, the lecturers going on strike. All the critical indicators are going south. I wonder what the president is proud of. And at a time like this, we need certain skills which are clearly not present in State House. In State House, we've got very skillful politicians. But a moment like this does not require politics or politicians. A moment like this requires people who can focus on policy. And it is through policy that you make deliberate and intentional moves, take measures to change the lives of the people. It is not going to be solved through the Sunday prayer meetings. It is going to be solved through deliberate action to deal with some of these things. For example, it is easy to blame global forces for the fall of the Kenyan shilling. But it is not just global forces at play. It is our responsibility and it is the responsibility of the national government or central government to take critical and strategic interventions to prop up the economy. And one thing we are not talking about is that the Kenya shilling is losing because we are largely an import economy. We import virtually everything. Whereas in the past, a few years past independence, Kenya was a manufacturing country and you were exporting to neighboring countries. So we want to hear that in this 1 year that the president has been in the office, what have we done to spur our the competitiveness of our manufacturing sector so that instead of importing everything and therefore being at the mercy of global forces, we can start exporting so that we can earn foreign currency.
Right.
How do we also revitalize certain sectors that, in school you used to be told tourism is the greatest earner of foreign exchange. Right now, those sectors are not doing well because every other day, because of insecurity, which we have still not managed to contain, and yet we want to go to Haiti. Just a month ago, the Senate was in Turkana, and not many Kenyans know that you cannot drive to Turkana without the escort.
Okay, Deputy Speaker, I see a smile at the mention of the countersuits, but when the President is saying that white other persons that are leading this country then would be at a worse situation, are you convinced that the government is doing what it must, but also the questions that Senator Kajwang here raises, those indicators that show that we are not heading in the right direction?
I think it's common knowledge and everyone can agree that Kenyans are going through a difficult time, and that cannot be denied. But to paint a gloomy picture like there's no future and that there's no hope is really unbecoming of a leader. Your job is to show people hope. And in as much as Honorable Kajwang, Senator Kajwang has painted a gloomy picture, he said something that I completely agree with him. He says there need to be deliberate action and there need to be strategic intervention that must be undertaken in order to turn around the economy. And that's why I'm very glad that he's not saying that street demonstrations are going to be the solution. He has said strategic and deliberate action. And let me list out some of the strategic and deliberate action. We all know that we came from a very difficult economic times, which wasn't made easy by 2 years of COVID. And then soon after, we've had drought and we had floods. That's common knowledge. So yes, things haven't been good or easy. So we didn't get here overnight because President RUTO was in office. This is something that we've gone through some really difficult challenges coming to this stage. And the question you should be asking, have those deliberate steps been undertaken? The answer is yes.